Hey everyone, welcome back to Release Notes. My name is Logan Kilpatrick. I'm on the Google DeepMind team. Today we're joined by Varun Mohan, who's the co-lead for Google Antigravity. Varun, thank you for being here. Let's dive in and talk about Antigravity. Do you want to sort of give us the TLDR and like the high level of what the product is and all that stuff?
Yeah, so Antigravity is an agent development platform. Obviously, it has an IDE, but there are a couple sort of key differentiators we've come to market with to kind of start with. So in the very beginning, one of the things it has is it has a familiar editor that all of us know how to use, but it also has this agent manager that allows you to orchestrate many agents that can operate over your code base. And in addition, a brand new surface, which is the browser. Agents now, with the advent of Gemini 3, can also actuate the browser in a very capable way. On top of that, the agents are able to interact with the developer in these kind of indivisible sort of tasks that are and units that called artifacts that sort of give the developer verifiable steps that the agent is kind of going through. And the user can kind of go in back and forth with these artifacts to kind of complete longer and longer tasks. Kind of the inspiration here is, and a lot of it was by seeing Gemini 3, we basically saw that models are able to now go longer and longer with less human intervention. And we want to take maximal advantage of this to kind of give the best possible experience to developers.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm excited to deep dive on like all the nuance of anti-gravity and some of the innovation from a product perspective. Actually, just to sort of set the stage, you came over to DeepMind, joined Google to start focused on building this product, to do a bunch of agentic coding stuff. Just to sort of like that experience of like coming over and like how it's been actually now seeing. And obviously, I think you all were, sort of training models in some capacity before, but like now being sort of super close to like the frontier foundation model perspective, I'm curious how that's like influenced your sort of like level of ambition, but like also excitement and like what you're thinking about from a product experience, and like also just generally what has it been like to come and join DeepMind and do all this stuff?
I think first, what you said, I think that resonated the most is the level of ambition. I think the level of ambition has increased tremendously. And that's kind of because we don't need to reinvent the wheel in a lot of different pieces, right? The model is like an incredibly important piece to this experience, right?
Yeah.
We can see this if you have a bad model and it's not able to go and follow instructions properly, not able to take many steps in a row, it doesn't really matter. You're kind of dead on arrival.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And I think one of the benefits of coming here that we've sort of seen is how much we're pushing the frontier of models, not only for coding, but across many different axes, like multimodal capability, UI control. All of these different pieces, I think, are really critical to deliver a great experience. When I look at the kind of industry over time, you can kind of see how things have transformed, right? If you go to 2021, you see the advent of GitHub Copilot, right? And it had kind of basic autocomplete. And that was already kind of groundbreaking at the time, right? And then after that, you had some of these chat experiences with Gemini and ChatGPT. And that started to make its way into the IDE as well, right? A chat panel on the very side that kind of understood your code base. It was very personalized to all the private data inside a company or inside an organization. And then after that, you sort of had these agentic IDEs and agentic experiences. And I think the next version of this, it can no longer be the case that you understand code only. They look at the browser. They kind of do some research, right? They might read some papers. On top of that, they might look at their bug reports to see what tasks to ultimately solve. And I think that's what got me and the team very excited about the fact that our models are getting very capable, not only in the silo, but across many dimensions.
This is one of the threads that I personally had not sort of deeply grokked until I started thinking about this, like coming up to these launches, of just like how important but also different and impressive it is to bring those like non sort of coding developer, even though developers are doing research, and like non-traditional like developer tasks into this experience. And I'm curious like how you sort of like think about finding the balance, because obviously like developers do a whole lot of like they're on meetings and they have calendar needs, and like where do you sort of draw the line of like what is like stops being a core part of that experience and you would sort of like outsource out of that main product experience versus like what do you pull in, and like maybe research is one of those things, and something like QA testing or deployments or stuff like that, like where's that line in your head right now?
Yeah, so when I think about what does a developer ultimately do, writing code is maybe a very small chunk of what they ultimately do, right?
Yeah.
They write code, they review code, they test code, they debug code, they deploy code, right? There's many aspects of this. And for each of those, they might actually have a completely different surface, right? I'll give you an example, right? Inside Google, we use Google Docs, right? And we might write up system designs inside Google Docs. And it's quite important actually to understand the system design if you're going to go make a large scale change in the code, or you're going to review code, right? For that matter. And in that case, I think if all we did was looked at the code only, we'd be operating in a very narrow silo. We wouldn't be able to solve these very hard problems for the developer. And the way I like to look at it is it's almost like you're chopping wood, right? A developer has 100 units of time. Some units of time is spent writing code. And we can, if we, all we do, let's say that's 20%, if all we do is we make it very easy, once you know exactly what to do to write the code, I think there's a limit to how much more we can accelerate software development, right? Like I think basically if you look at the hierarchy of needs and what we're able to provide for developers, it's like what should I build? How should I build it? And building it. And I think the models, if we're only able to do code, they help with the building it part. But how should I build it? It's actually a very interesting question that I think AI can help accelerate tremendously. And I think anti-gravity has a lot of the pieces to kind of push in that direction as well, right?
Who is actually the ideal user for anti-gravity? Like and both like actually there's lots of folks using it internally. It's available externally now. Like who do you think is going to be like the most successful user persona today?
I think it's very important in all of these products in general to be a dog fooder of the product, right? Otherwise, you're kind of just like implementing a bunch of features, and you kind of see these products where all they have is a bunch of features, and you're unsure exactly what's going to get used or what's not going to get used. So internally at Google, a lot of Google DeepMind actually does use the product. This gives us like a lot of rich feedback about how we can iterate even before we ship something to the public.
For folks who don't have context, the internal Google code base, all this infrastructure is extremely, I would guess,
It's
on
large.
average, much more complex than other environments, like anywhere in the world. I think that's a really unique requirement and like challenge of doing this actually inside of Google. It'd be easier to like build something completely external that doesn't have to touch Google stuff. And I think the internal stuff is extremely difficult.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is definitely hardening our product to work with the largest enterprises. I think if any enterprise kind of talks to us and is like, hey, is anti-gravity working on a very large code base? I think very few companies have a larger code base than Google. Surprisingly, yeah, we, because of the product and, targeting all these developers, folks like Sergey use the product all the time. He's shipping a lot of CLs and PRs now, which I guess is like a really good thing for him to be dogfooding the product as well. But I think at a high level, sort of, we're trying to make sure that a lot of the researchers inside the company are able to use the product. And the benefit here is they can kind of also see the capabilities of the Gemini models in real world scenarios. It also gives us a lot of rich feedback of what is it like for anti-gravity to be useful for solving very complex tasks. Right. I think there's one thing for if we're vibe coding very ephemeral applications, but I guess the real persona, and you got to it, is the developer.
Yeah.
Right. We want developers to be able to build their dreams, right? We want them to be able to build very complex apps that solve really hard business use cases. We'd like singular developers to build entire companies, right? I think this is like a line that's floating around a lot in the ether right now. But I think as a whole, kind of working with a lot of the researchers, we've also learned a lot, right? Yeah. About the style of tasks that we need to be able to solve. And this dovetails back to the conversation of the model only being good at code. It's very clear if we want to accelerate a lot of research, which we're very excited to do, the model will need to do a lot of things beyond just write code, right? A researcher might fire off a training job. They might kick off an eval. They might need to analyze the eval. And this is like a lot of boilerplate work that they're doing, a lot of which doesn't sit inside the editor, right? And sits on many other surfaces. And this also was the inspiration for why we want the browser, right? It's not just for UI testing kind of simple web applications. It's for actually actuating the browser for very complex use cases that we'd like for the general developer.
And how do you think about do you have a sense that this user persona will change over time? Like obviously the whole sort of like tailwind of like who is a developer is changing, what it means to create software is changing. I do think the experience today like feels very developer centric. And do you think like over time you'll sort of like add abstraction layers on top of that?
So one interesting thing we've already found is folks that are not technical are already using anti-gravity internally,
nice.
which is very cool to see. I think the way I would like for us to think about it is we should be constantly trying to raise the ceiling of the product but also making it really, really easy for folks that are just technical adjacent to be able to get value from the product, right? But I think my worry about us opening up the floodgates today is we kind of become a product that is not good for either persona, right? And that's like a big worry that I sort of have. Like in my mind, if I'm looking at a pure vibe coding use case where you want to quickly build an app and then have all the bells and whistles of AI infused in it, AI Studio is an awesome platform to go and do this.
Yeah.
And I think we should not be trying to replicate that experience, right? We would love for people to use AI Studio for those experiences. And if they have an application that they'd like to kind of continue to iterate on over time or add more features to over time, we would like Antigravity to be the right platform for that.
This was, you and I were going back and forth on this, and I think it's actually an interesting point to make mention of. Like, we will actually have the AI Studio to anti-gravity path. We're still figuring out the details and making sure that it works well and all that stuff. But like, I do think like for a lot of folks, they start, even technical folks, they like start with this vibe coding journey, and they're like, okay, great, I sort of can now start to materialize my idea. I am a software engineer, I am a developer, I really want to go deep on this and make sure I've made all the right technical decisions to scale up, et cetera, et cetera. And I think being able to like take things that you vibe coded out of AI Studio, go to anti-gravity, I think is going to be this like magical experience. So I'm excited for that to land. Hopefully
awesome.
The team.
I think that's going to make these apps like more economically valuable to the people that are building them.
100%. I'm also curious, like this sort of like broad industry trend of like agents versus the IDE. And obviously you sort of like have both of these. Do you think there's a world where like you stop, like the IDE actually goes away and you sort of are truly orchestrating agents? I think, and I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but like there's like literally like design product decisions that you all been making the last few days about like, what is the default experience? Like, what do we drop developers into? And I think there's actually, this is an interesting thread of like, how do you meet developers where they are today versus like also showing them this future of what you could do? And yeah, I'm curious like that tension actually as you build this.
Yeah, I think for like the foreseeable future, the editor is not going away. And that's purely because I think developers need the control to ultimately see the underlying code and edit it. Right at the lowest level. Like taking that away is going to be like catastrophic in a lot of cases, right? Yeah. But I think what ultimately does happen is maybe the time you spend actually writing singular lines of code in the editor, doing autocompletes and all these things may drastically go down over time, right? And then what ultimately ends up happening is the editor looks like any other work surface for a developer, right? If you think about it, there are many places that a developer generates a work product. Editor is one. Maybe inside their code review tool is another. Maybe in a Google Docs or Docs or Sheets is another one. And I guess all of these become like important surfaces that kind of an agent can operate on top of and collaborate with a human, right? But I don't think it is going to be the case that the editor itself is going to go away. I think the entry point of how much time people spend looking at individual lines of code in the editor instead of looking at artifacts, which is a new kind of paradigm that we brought together. Yeah. I think the trade-off will be the amount of time people spend looking at artifacts and verifiable sort of units from the agent is going to increase, right? And I think the nature of why that's going to be the case in general is, let's imagine the AI is going to write most of your code. Then actually a lot of it is going to be the AI needs to figure out, and the agent needs to figure out a way to make it easy for the developer to review the code without kind of like making them write every piece themselves, right? So there does need to be this higher level abstraction that lives between the kind of developer and the agent. And yeah, the editor may not be the editor or the lines of code themselves may not be that interface.
Yeah, I totally buy that, to be honest. I feel like it is this like evolution of like and like today you're reviewing PRs or CLs if you're internal to Google. And like in the future, maybe it literally is you're reviewing like the implementation plan or like the execution plan or like the final test suite or something like that. That brings me to another thread around sort of this like agent human collaboration and how like verification and autonomy and all that stuff is like baked into the product experience. But obviously today, like models can't run for, at least, reliably in a lot of cases, aren't running for days on end or even like hours on end. It is a little bit sort of like faster of a feedback loop. So I'm curious how you all are thinking about it in anti-gravity today. Like, when is the human in the loop versus like what decisions can you just like fully delegate and let the model run with?
So actually, we give you a way in the product to kind of have this thing called agent-assisted development, which is you can actually specify the level of autonomy you want to give the agent. And the agent itself can decide hey, like for these kinds of terminal commands that it runs, or for these tasks, does it want to notify the user? Does it think the threshold is high enough to notify the user? And obviously we have like evaluations internally to make sure that these are reasonable.
Yeah.
But is this reasonable? Are these commands that are being run something that it should tell the user? And I think you do need to kind of trust that the AI will do this. But at the same time, you need to give kind of the escape hatch for the developer to kind of provide feedback. And that's why kind of in the artifact, you can asynchronously provide feedback anywhere. You can provide feedback almost like comments on a Google Doc, right? In on the artifact. Also on the chat panel, you can always write a comment, and that will be folded into whatever the agent is doing. The agent will decide when the right time is to fold in this, right? So I think there's going to be a mix of everything, because I see a world, and I already see this right now at Google, where folks are going and grabbing a coffee and coming back, and they're looking at the work that the agent has done, and they're like, hey, actually, I want to tweak it this way. And it'll go and take that feedback and go and continue working for the next 30, 40 minutes, actually. Yeah, it's kind of remarkable that this has happened in such a short period of time.
Yeah, that is super interesting. I have a very tactical question, which is this, and we actually see this across the ecosystem for a lot of these coding agents today, is what's happening on server side versus what's happening locally. And I think this is an interesting distinction. And I think today, if my understanding is correct, is Antigravity is running locally on my device. Obviously, it's connected to a server, a model that's hosted on a server somewhere, but like the code is being generated and stuff, and it's visible on my computer. How do you think about like that? And obviously that means like I have to have my computer has to be on in order to continue to make progress. How do you think about that experience today versus like the server side background agent sort of running in a container somewhere, and like the trade-off between those two, and like do they converge at some point? Are they completely different use cases long term as well?
No, I think that they do converge. I think that's because this isn't like, you have to imagine a model or an agent that is able to go for a very short period of time and complete a task, or can go a long period of time, can also complete the task in a short period of time. Yeah. The model is not going to be somehow able to only think long but not think short, right? It would be a weird property. And I think that's what all of us here at Google and DeepMind are really pushing for, right? Models that can go for longer and longer and execute tasks and more complex tasks, right? And you're totally right. I think these tasks outliving the sort of developer's machine is going to be quite important. But I think all the principles that we just talked about being able to provide feedback and all these different pieces is very, very important. And I think the reason why it's important and why some of these asynchronous experiences haven't taken off nearly as much, at least in the market, I think is actually because I don't know about you, but I'm really, really bad about communicating my intentions to the model, right? When I tell it, hey, do X, in the back of my head, I have 100 other requirements. Yep. And I'm not very good at specifying them. Like, I could actually tell all of our users, hey, specify every requirement up front, but some things you only learn after you see the code. Yeah. It's a very iterative journey. It's kind of like why you can make a PRD or a system design, but ultimately when rubber meets the road and you actually build this thing out, there's a gap between the two. You realize, hey, this piece actually didn't fit in the way you thought it did. And because of that, actually, despite having a very asynchronous system, you need mechanisms to allow the user to kind of understand the progress so far and iterate on it. So I think all the pieces we have built into Antigravity are going to really, really like help in that environment as well. I think you really want that there, right? I find it very hard to believe I have a very complex code base. I say do X and specify a sentence, it is going to come back with exactly the right thing I want, right? Because one approach that it could take is delete all my code and rewrite it all from scratch and then do X, but I wouldn't really want this, right? Yeah. And I actually think this dovetails into one last thing that we do have in Antigravity that I think helps with this experience, which is that I think one of the things that I love about Google as a product as a whole, and my goal is not to just say only positive things about Google, is it almost feels like it does read your mind and understand context. Right. Like for instance, if I just sort of like searched a lot about a basketball game and then I wrote Curry, it's going to show me Steph Curry. It's not going to show me chicken curry. Yeah. Right. And I think you want the same experience also when you're using the agent. And because of that, actually, self-improvement is kind of built as a key sort of primitive into Antigravity. Actually,
this is the knowledge panel.
This is the knowledge panel. So the idea here is like as you're using the product, it is actually building up knowledge of your usage. So the next time you use it, it is not re-deriving everything, right? Because you can imagine these conversations that you have with the agent, they're very rich in information. They're not only, they teach the agent things that are outside of the code base. Because a lot of knowledge, it's kind of like what you said, right? There's a lot of meetings that we do have, and that builds intrinsic knowledge that doesn't live inside the code base. Yeah. Right? And the code base might be a little bit out of date on what the actual intent of the user is. And I think that kind of helps you bridge the gap. But despite all of that, I don't think that this is enough. I do think you want an interactive experience, even if the model is able to go out for days, weeks, and months, right? Imagine the idea of someone telling you, "Hey, Logan, go implement this feature," and you're like, "Okay." The agent says it's going to take 3 weeks. You look at it at the end of 3 weeks, and it's wrong. You're gonna be like, it's bad, right? Like,
Yeah.
release date needs to keep getting bumped at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's so many human analogies where like, if you were an engineering team, like the worst outcome is I, as a product person, say like, I need X, Y, and Z feature. And then I show back up in 3 weeks after they've completely done everything. And then I'm like, this actually isn't what I want.
Yeah.
Like you check in, there's an
Yes.
iterative process. So I think,
That's right.
I think it like mirrors what humans do today as a best practice. As you have been talking, and I think more broadly in this moment of like, the anti-gravity product coming together and sort of agents coming together, it is interesting. One of my reactions is just like or the questions in my mind is just like, how much do some of these like agentic coding experiences generalized across domains that have nothing to do with coding? Like as you're describing, like, the human in the loop components, I want to be able to like have knowledge. I want to be able to like do tasks in the browser and research. Like I start to imagine, I'm like, this is just like all work fits in. And obviously some work you're generating code for, some work you're creating other artifacts. And I'm curious, like, maybe there are a bunch of bespoke things that will continue just for software, but have you thought much about like how much this generalizes to just an agent overall?
I guess the hard part about this is this goes to show the power of these models.
Yeah.
Which is that they are like generally very intelligent.
Yeah.
Right. And that enables you to solve many tasks. And I think you're totally right. I found myself using anti-gravity for very different things. Right. I think recently I asked it to analyze a bunch of metric data. Right. And this metric data had nothing to do with the code or anything. Right. Actually, it was on some website. I wanted to analyze some sports stats.
Yeah.
And actually wrote like a very local script. It did some stuff, generated me an artifact, a plot. I iterated on the plot a little bit in image space. And then after that, I got a brand new plot. And now I've been kind of like using this internally just to kind of like analyze. I guess maybe to give you an example, like I just started getting to baseball, and Shohei Ohtani seems like kind of otherworldly figures. I've been just analyzing other baseball players to see, is there anyone remotely close? Surprise, surprise, no one is remotely close. But I just wanted to kind of get some metrics on that. And I think it's very, very easy to see how this generalizes beyond just software development. I guess the reason why we are not talking about this as if it's a very general purpose tool is I always have kind of a deep worry that, hey, if we go and try to make the product great for everyone, we will make the product great for no one.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like a deep worry that I sort of have. And I think we deeply understand the developer. We're all developers, ultimately. And I think one of the things that is true that I think is exciting is the number of developers in the world has been growing. Right. So maybe that's the right way to kind of formulate this, is the number of people that are builders and developers is going up. Right. And that's just because the ease of building has been going up. Right. You look at the very beginning, people were writing assembly.
Yeah.
Very, very hard to.
Horrible. Assembly is horrible. If you haven't written assembly, don't write assembly.
Yeah, exactly. And then after that, you had C, right? And then you had C++, Java, Python. And Python, if you just look at the gap in what a Python developer needs to know and what an assembly developer needs to know, it almost looks like they are not the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? And the barrier to entry is now definitely reducing over time. And I think anti-gravity, I think, will serve a need for people that want to build, right? But also at the same time, for the people that are just experienced developers, it will continue to sort of increase the ceiling. I think the commitment that we have is we are not just going to make it so that it is very easy to build these ephemeral apps. We want to make it so that if you're operating over the hardest code bases, the most complex code bases that provide the most business value, we will accelerate sort of development as much as we can.
Yeah, I love that. I have a bunch of very narrow questions. One, what got you into baseball? Just the World Series.
I'm not gonna lie. I think just this idea of I guess this is maybe like a childhood dream. You're like, can someone, or like, I guess I played Little League for like a year.
Yeah.
In elementary school, and there was like someone who was very good, and he both could pitch and bat, and you kind of like hear about baseball, and it's like people are very specialized.
Yeah.
And somehow Shohei is just doing both at a world-class level, and you're like, this doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't make sense that this is even possible. Like, probabilistically, this does not make sense. And that's like a childhood dream of having someone so overpowered that exists out there.
It's like Gemini 3 Pro.
Yes, this is just
Probably shouldn't exist. Where another fast follow one is like, where does the anti-gravity name come from?
So I think as developers, we're remarkably bad at sort of naming things. So we went externally for this to someone we think is like genuinely amazing, Dale. And I think the reason why this fit, the reason why we thought this fit was like we want to create an experience where you're basically not limited at all, right? And your imagination is kind of the only constraint. And I think this idea of anti-gravity and the space theme and the fact that there's basically no limits was sort of very attractive to us.
Yeah, I love that. I also feel like it ties to this like Gemini 3 narrative of like helping you bring any idea to life, and the model's really capable of doing that. So I feel like there's a lot of dovetail. It also, well, we've been trying for a long time to somehow get the first people vibe coding in space. So I think maybe anti-gravity will be the first sort of
even doing that.
I don't know. We got to figure it out. Supposedly it's like $500,000 for launch tickets or something. I don't know. We'll see if it happens. But we got to get Anti-Gravity as the first developer coding product on the moon. Let's figure out how to make it happen. I don't know.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, another great property is kind of the like a shortened acronym is kind of like AGY.
Yeah.
Which I think is both short, catchy. Obviously, wink, wink to AGI.
Yeah, I think this is the best. One of the best.
Logan seems to think that itself has justified the entire naming.
The whole naming for AGY makes sense. Every time I see it, I'm like, I get it. This is tongue in cheek. This is great. So kudos to you and to the marketing team for coming up with that. It's a great, it's a great acronym. One of the things that gets me most excited about the anti-gravity experiences is not just like a single one. It's not just Gemini 3 Pro that's coming to the experience. It's actually like the whole suite of Google's models, including our latest generative AI models, or generative media models rather. You want to sort of talk through that at the high level and like how you're thinking about like what models actually make it into the experience?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's particularly exciting to the team, at least being at GDM and then also at Google, is that we have state-of-the-art models across many realms, right? Image generation, the latest and greatest nano banana sort of capabilities are embedded into the product. All the future capabilities on day one, we envision will also be in the product as well. We want to be at the cutting edge of what Gemini has to offer. The benefit here is we're kind of at the forefront of what the model is, and we're also able to then push the models, not only on the product side, but the research side, in terms of here's what frontier agentic capabilities are, and here's how we need to be making the models more capable in many, many different axes. As you pointed out, UI control is also baked into the model as well. And super excited about the progress we made in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I feel like this ensemble of all the models coming together is super powerful. So maybe we actually, let's do the experience, let's try the demo, and we'll see the models come together.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
This is an example of sort of a very simple app. I think the benefit of showing this is to kind of see what the brand new capabilities anti-gravity brings to the table. It's going to be Airbnb for dogs here. It's not the most complex code base. Very hard to show a demo of something working in a complex code base in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask, I want to build an app for Airbnb for dogs. Can you just show me a couple designs? And let me review them. Right. So now it should just go out and as it's going and doing work, it's going and thinking, right? Our model has like dynamic thinking. It's able to think through things. And it's gonna kind of formulate a couple images for me to take a look at.
And maybe we can talk about images are one of the things that fall into this artifacts category. So you want to give the sort of quick TLDR on like what artifacts are and how folks should be thinking about them?
Yeah. So as you can see, what it did very quickly was it generated a task. And a task is itself an artifact that kind of, in this case, it's trying to explain to the user what it is about to do. Right? An artifact is basically the mechanism for the agent to communicate with the user and some work product of like maybe the steps it's going to take or the steps it's already taken so far. So in this case, it has already generated a couple nice sort of images for me to kind of take a look at. One is called Canine Concierge, another one is called Pup Stay. Canine Concierge sounds very stateful. So maybe what I should do is I want to make a little bit of an edit here. Maybe what I can say is I want this to be called Pup Stay instead. So I'm going to take the best of one and another one. And I'm going to asynchronously provide it a review. As you can see, there's now a grayed out bubble here that kind of shows, hey, I did provide a review. It was almost, as you can see, almost in a Google Doc style format that I did. And I added a comment here. And as the model now goes through, it's going to pick up that comment, and we'll kind of see it do that as it does this. So it updated its task.md. It said, hey, it did review the design with the user, and it's now picked up my sort of comment as well. Right.
Yes.
So we'll see that come about.
Is it common? Would you want to like queue up like 4 or 5 of those?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
I can queue up 4 or 5 of these messages to the AI. It's kind of similar to how, if we did this and we actually went and grabbed coffee, I might see something and I might not like what I saw.
Yeah.
And I'll just queue up a bunch of tasks. So it generated an implementation plan for me. Honestly, I because it's a demo, I'm not going to read it that carefully, but I feel very strongly about adding documentation. Similarly, Google Doc style, I can like add a comment here and I can say, please make sure to document the HTML file.
And we had talked before about this sort of like notion of the knowledge panel. And is this maybe one of the inputs? If you're like consistently saying like, I want documentation for my app, or I want it to use X, Y, and Z style format, or library, et cetera, those are the types of things that will like automatically be picked up and then distilled into this like knowledge panel, so that I won't have to ideally continue to
do it every time.
Feedback. Yeah.
So this is purely an artifact. Actually, the artifacts that you generate can be used in the future. They're actually something that can be. So let's say I did build an artifact and I continue to use the repository, it can pull this up. Knowledge is something that the model is given the opportunity when it goes through some amount of work to kind of save some state.
Yeah.
And once again, it's crazy that this is not like some hacked up thing or heuristic. This is the model deciding I did a meaningful chunk of work that is very specific, and I'd like to remember this going forward and potentially retrieve it in the future.
Yeah.
And our product is capable of kind of retrieving these pieces of knowledge. So one of the things that just happened, by the way, along the way, is it kind of wanted to install something. And actually, a lot of terminal commands we've run in auto mode, but for installation where it changes something on your local machine, we come back to the user and ask it to kind of make the change. As you can see for that, I just plopped open the editor here. What we have open is the manager, and I was able to kind of accept the change there. So this is one of those cases where I don't need to commit to one way or another. I can take a look at the code if I really want, and you can see that a bunch of code was actually generated, and I could open this and kind of read it. I don't want to right now. I'm being lazy. But yeah, it went and created a sort of implementation. It's going to continue sort of operating, and we'll kind of see what it comes out with.
Do you see practically, do folks like, and this is a very nuanced question, but like, do they like split screen like IDE and then agent manager, or is it literally like most of the time you're like, just from folks internally and externally we've been testing with, is like mostly in the agent or mostly in the IDE, or like, how do you see the split right now?
It's interesting. I think for tasks where you want to do something very, very high level, by the way, once again, you can see creating documented HTML structure. You can see that it already took my piece of feedback.
Yeah.
You might live entirely in sort of the agent manager entirely, right? And I'll show you cases where you can pop open the inbox and kind of see a bunch of tasks queued up, like at a much higher level, and you can operate on it. But if you're going to make a very nuanced change and it's going to edit a lot of code, you probably do want to look at the code kind of ultimately as well. It really depends on what you're trying to do. I found myself actually using the agent manager to do a lot of deep research style queries. And for that, actually, I can live entirely in sort of the agent manager because I actually trust the summary that the model is kind of giving me.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So actually, interestingly, what it did was it created the app. It is now capturing screenshots of the running app. So this is actually the beautiful part of Antigravity able to actuate the Chrome browser itself. This is a pretty beautiful website, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's now the highlighted sort of blue boundary that you can see indicates that the agent is operating on top of it. So hey, the agent is doing some work here. So I'm going to go back because we want to let the user know that something like this is happening. And it's going through kind of a verification step. And the beautiful part about this is it even provides a screenshot of what it did in the verification step, or like a kind of walkthrough of what ultimately ended up happening. So this is one of those cases where actually, if I walked away and grabbed a coffee and came back, I could actually be like, okay, how did you know that the website looked good? And it's actually that, okay, I had a screenshot. I actually recorded stuff and clicked some buttons along the way. And here is actually the proof of work that what I had was actually correct.
I love that.
At the very end.
And
So
we were talking off camera right before this, but there's a anti-gravity Chrome this just like plugs into your existing Chrome and then
plugs into existing Chrome.
do an
No
extension.
installation necessary. It just opens up a Chrome profile and is able to operate right there. So you can just take over from there and continue using it as if it's your own browser.
Nice, awesome. And is the browser actuation mostly right now testing, or will it also like for the research that you were explaining before, like those types of tasks, will it like go to Google search and like start like browsing around and doing that type of stuff, or is it
100% do that?
Oh, interesting.
In fact,
Nice.
we found it doing that as well. And
Yeah,
we
yeah.
actually evaluate the model on all of these capabilities and in the product setting itself to be able to actually go and do deep research and all these other things. And the reason is fundamentally because you can imagine one of the use cases, I guess, like we've sort of tried doing is, hey, find me my top priority bugs and then sort by them. So this actually requires you to go on a brand new website, maybe use the search functionality, click a couple buttons to research, to kind of like filter and sort through things, and ultimately come back with, hey, here's the task you need to do. So this is much more than just open an app and just click a couple buttons. It's actually deeply understanding like a page.
Yeah, yeah.
Needing to use search and a bunch of other tools on there.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and by the way, this uses the latest and greatest like UI control capabilities of the Gemini models.
Yeah.
To basically be able to do this.
State of the art.
Yeah. So maybe just to walk through a little bit about this, just through the course of doing this, you can kind of see the model has given you, and the agent has given you kind of the proof of work of everything it did. It provided all of its design concepts that got you here, right? It also gave you like a nice implementation plan, the set of tasks that it accomplished, and a final walkthrough about this, right? And implemented, like you can actually see that it took all my feedback. It implemented the canine concierge aesthetic with the pop stay branding. So it actually like provides all of this. And if I want, I can even pop open the files in the manager itself. This is one of those cases where you don't need to jump out. Once again, we're not trying to say the editor is not useful, but we want to make it possible that this becomes your command center in a lot of ways for all of these agents. And you can even see all of the videos that I can now comment on and continue to sort of iterate on, right? Let's take a look at the app. One interesting thing about the app is it very clearly only tried to make the pages I cared about, which is the main page. If I actually hover over experiences and become a host, it is very clearly pointing to nothing. So what I'm going to do now is I'll actually showcase a new capability, which is that I can actually create many sort of agents that kind of operate over the same piece of code. In fact, I can even do it across many pieces. But let me just start a brand new conversation, right? So I'm going to start a brand new conversation about Airbnb. I wanted to,
And just to clarify, how do you know when you go to the inbox that like you're connected to? It's because you like have the workspace selected, and that's how it's like attached to a specific project.
yeah. So the inbox, and I'll show it to you just shortly. It actually has basically all the agent sort of work streams that I've had are in the inbox, regardless of what sort of workspace I was operating on top of. So this is a brand new workspace called Airbnb. It was empty when we started. So right now I'm just going to kick off a couple things, and let's just do that first. So I'm going to say the experiences tab is empty. Fill it in, right? And I'm going to do that. And then I'm also in parallel going to start another conversation. It's very quick to do this. I'm going to now say the become a host tab is empty, fill it in. And actually I want to start another conversation here. I have another project called baseball stats. I don't really know what it does. What does this do? Right. I think it was made a while ago. So now I can kind of see a bunch of these running sort of tabs here, and one of them has become idle, and I can pop in whenever I want, and I can search for these conversations. I can search for only the pending ones. You can kind of see 3 or 4 of them are kind of pending right now and running.
And
I can pop in whenever I want.
Yeah, and idle means like the task is done and it's like ready for you to
to jump in if I really want.
Got it.
Right? And now it's made me a brand new implementation plan for this one that I can take a look at. I really don't want to take a look at it that closely right now, so I'll just wait for it. This is like our coffee moment. So I can pop open the inbox, and I can actually see a couple of them have finished, or one of them is actually finished, right? Correspondingly. So one of them has actually gone idle. So it's actually done a proper kind of deep research for me here of what this does. So it said based on the analysis, it's a React web application that breaks down some data from some sources, and here's something. And I can dig deeper if I really want, but this is like one of those things now that it's kind of changed my development model. If the cost of asking a question, making changes is so low, I'm just firing off a lot of things in parallel, right? And I can now orchestrate many of these agents. And the beautiful thing about this is this actually operated on a brand new workspace. In the past, you would need to open up an entirely new editor window. This is why these two have been decoupled, if that makes sense. Like why we've done this. And if I really want, there's always a shadow editor available, even for this workspace called baseball stat. So I can press Command D and I'm right there.
Wow.
So if I want, I can have it. But if I don't want and I want to be decluttered, it's gone. So, so we have that. And now we have, interestingly, for the file experiences, it really wants me to go and run something, to run a command. So I'm going to press accept. It's actually going and modifying the browser too. So, and going and doing things. So I guess like the agent is going and doing its own thing here. It opened up a browser. Because it opened up the browser, it should hopefully give me some sort of verification of what it did. It's going and ripping through a bunch of tool calls in parallel.
How much do you find that, like personally for you as you're using anti-gravity, that you're sort of going with the flow of model suggesting versus like, and I guess this depends on like the model quality overall versus like course correcting me, like, no, actually go and do these things as well. Do you just spend more time, again, firing off thoughts and trying to like try different things versus like over correcting models in certain directions?
Yeah, I feel like I find myself understanding the hills and valleys of the model. In other words, I feel like at every given point, I'm always trying to push the capabilities of the model more and more. And the benefit of sort of doing that is as I understand that more, I kind of give it more autonomy. It's like, okay, I specified the task well enough. I'm just going to kind of let it go do what it's doing. And I don't really want to review what it's doing.
Yeah. I love it.
So it basically has implemented the become a host page. So I can see this. It created this beautiful become a host page. I have a walkthrough. And the beauty of the walkthrough is it actually shows me clicking, the model clicking become a host and scrolling. So once again, I could live here entirely. If the browser was closed, I could totally do that.
Yeah, and just from this is tied to the model piece, but also just like the product experience story. Is your suggestion for developers as they're sort of like putting anti-gravity through its paces, like should they be, taking like, here are the 25 features I want in this app and like just dropping those into like a single workspace or like a single like model turn and then just it'll do the implementation plan and it'll test everything? Or is it like break it up into smaller pieces and kick those off independently? Or like what's the best practice?
I've found myself really enjoying breaking it off into smaller pieces and kicking them off independently.
Okay.
And the reason is just because I think the implementation plans, the verification is much more digestible.
Yeah.
In this case. Now, granted, this does mean that it is like quite important that what you're looking at is disjoint. So you do need to, at this point, be a little smart about it. But ultimately, if you're doing something that touches many different pieces, you do need to think about the coordination of it. Yeah. If you want 10 different features and they all kind of do 10 different things, it's actually important that you understand what's going on.
Yeah, no, that's it. I feel like it's very much like sort of a collaborative partner. Like it really is like there's a human in the loop. Like in some cases you can sort of let the model go off and run wild, but I feel like the way it sounds like the way you're saying is the best experience is doing it with the model and you're sort of continuing to give the feedback iteratively.
That's right.
Well, one of the big questions is like, obviously sort of to set the macro context, like this is, and we were chatting about this in Ping over the last couple of weeks, but like this is V1 of the anti-gravity experience. And like
to say it's V0.
V0.1 of the anti-gravity experience. And like, it's awesome. And folks I think are going to enjoy it and be super excited. But like, what's the sort of like path to follow along with? Obviously you all are going to be shipping a ton of stuff and like the pace of progress on the model side, the product side is going to be really rapid. Like how do people stay in the loop? Or do we have to do a podcast every time you all go and ship a bunch of stuff?
Yeah, I think how we think about it is the model capabilities will continue to increase. And as the model capabilities continue to increase, there will be brand new product form factors that take advantage of the model capabilities.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you've seen in the past, right? As we said, autocomplete, it was very quick. You just had some ghost text, right? And then chat, you had a chat panel on the side. The agent now, it's able to kind of like make changes in the code base and you're allowed to review them. Now with the agent manager, you can now orchestrate tens or hundreds of agents in parallel that are each not only operating on top of your IDE, but a browser, right? And as you can see, each of the times the model capabilities increase. And why is the agent manager possible? It's because the model can go for much longer.
Yeah.
The model could only go for one step. What's the point of running 10 or 20 of them in parallel? You just run one at a time.
Yeah.
Because you need to babysit it. And I think the way we'd like to think about it is over time, as the model capabilities increase, we are going to have brand new ways for the human to kind of like interact with the model, with the changes that the model makes. and it will birth new product form factors like artifacts. And I think that's what our team spends a lot of time thinking about. And that's what gets us like super excited.
Yeah. Anything on the near horizon to tease? Otherwise,
Just imagine experiences will get much faster. The model will be able to do more capable and complex tasks, and expect to be grabbing coffee very frequently while building software.
Varun, thanks for doing this. This was a ton of fun. I feel like folks are going to love Google Antigravity. AGY is the coolest acronym ever, and I'm excited for my AGY swag. So you and the team owe me a bunch of stuff. And yeah, thanks for spending the time doing this.
This is awesome. Thanks a lot for having me, Logan.
Yeah, of course. And thanks everyone for watching Release Notes. We'll see you in the next episode.